Hello, and welcome back to another edition of I Got a Lot of Things to Say. I'm your host, Kia Dotson, and I am very honored because I'm having my very own Chai Day with Democratic strategist Chai Komanduri. Hi,
How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Good. So, for people who may not be familiar with you, I tell us a little bit about yourself and who you've worked for.
Yeah, I've been a Democratic strategist for over 20 years now. I worked first for John Kerry's presidential campaign. I worked for President Obama's two presidential campaigns. I worked for Hillary Clinton's presidential campaigns. Did not work for Joe Biden's presidential campaign in 20, but I do have covered every presidential campaign for the last 20 years except for that one.
Cool. And for people who look familiar, yes, this is the Chai Komanduri from MSNBC's The Beat with Ari Melber. So let's just dig right in and talk about this 2024 election, which I'm a Democrat. I've voted Democrat in I think all my presidential elections, I voted Democrat. I'm going to vote Democrat this year. But um, I see a really big change in some Democratic voters from 2020 to 2024.
Okay.
And I feel like some of them, like Biden is losing some of them. Um, and I really kind of want to know, because I believe in polls, but I don't believe in polls. And a lot of the polls are saying that he's losing to Trump. I feel like we saw that in 2020, and that wasn't the case. But what do you say to what's your opinion or perception on that? On how Biden's campaign has kind of not so much changed, but how Biden needs to reach um, different how Biden needs to reach voters differently in 2020 versus now.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I have said on the beat, and I've always been very clear about, I really believe that Joe Biden needs to address the age issue in a very head on way, aggressively and repeatedly. I saw him do that on Seth Meyers. I think he needs
Mm-hmm.
to do that on every single late night talk show. I would put him on every single late night talk show, every single non traditional venues. Drew Barrymore's show, The View, Saturday Night Live, The Daily Show, and have him talk openly and honestly about his age. And, he should say, and he has said, that there are physical changes that he's undergone. He doesn't walk the way he used to. He perhaps does not speak as forcefully as he used to, but age has given him a tremendous amount of wisdom. And here is how Joe Biden, have applied the wisdom I have earned over these years, and talk about the legislation he's passed, which is entirely a result of the fact the man spent 50 years in the U.S. Congress and understood it well. And he has a tremendously impressive legislative record. Talk about his expertise in foreign policy, where we are in the world. Talk about his vision for the future. And, he talked about this with Seth Meyers, the idea that his ideas are not old, that Donald Trump and Republicans like Mike Johnson want us to take everybody back to an earlier era of American life that was not so great for women and for minorities. And this is what my vision is, Joe Biden. He has grandkids and children. He should talk about them and about the world that he would like to see them be a part of in the world he's trying to create. So I think that is something that needs to happen. I think that is actually a prerequisite for all the other conversations. And I think that if there's been a mistake, it's been that we have talked about these other conversations, these other issues, without discussing the elephant in the room, which is age.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. And when it was funny because when the age thing started coming up, my first response to that was, well, Trump's old too.
Right.
Like they don't have that their age difference is what, 3-4 years, something like that.
Right.
And I don't necessarily believe that age should stop you from doing certain things. I absolutely agree that with age comes wisdom, which I feel that he has. And I think some people fail to recognize that. Um, I also believe that he has done something that I haven't seen a lot of other voters, I mean, other candidates do, maybe for the exception of Barack Obama,
Hmm.
but I've seen Biden really energize young people to vote. And I know people are going
Yeah.
to go, no, he hasn't, but he actually has. I've seen a lot of younger people, Gen Z, younger millennials, who he really um, propelled to speak for him and speak for his campaign. You can kind of see that that's evidence of that in his social media. Like the White House and Biden's social media sometimes is absolutely undefeated,
Yeah.
and I think that um, that is a testament to him listening to younger people. And I think that's a testament to him receiving that information. Um, I did not realize how much age has been playing a part in the discussions of Biden and how
Yeah.
it's being done in a negative way. So I think that's a really great strategy. We also have another elephant in the room for Biden too, I believe, with his handling of the Israel Hamas conflict. And as I said in a previous episode, there are things that you do not know, um, that we're not privy to. We just don't have I made a joke, like we don't have the security clearance to know that. And there are certain things that we aren't privy to. There are a lot of people upset. He's funding Israel and blah, blah. Okay, but A, we have treaties with Israel that we can't just break. B, we don't have a security clearance to know all the information that the president has. And C, I think he's trying to do the best of a very difficult, very complicated, very nuanced situation. And I think because of that, he's also losing a lot of voters. And I kind of wanted to get your perspective on the whole thing about voting non-committed in the primary. And is that going to help or hurt Biden? Because I have my opinion on it, but I want to hear of an expert opinion on it.
Yeah. So I think that whether it hurts Biden depends on where we are a few months from now in November. We could be in a very different place. There's already been a discussion about a ceasefire, and that has been agreed to by Israel. It has not yet been agreed to by Hamas. But if that happens, then I think we will be on the road to a different place. As far as voting uncommitted goes, I frankly think that's a waste of energy, and it's energy that people who care about the Palestinian issue should place elsewhere. So Joe Biden's position on Israel and Palestine is the same as Barack Obama's, is the same as Bill Clinton's, is the same as Jimmy Carter's. It is a two-state solution. That is the only solution. That's not my belief. That is certainly Joe Biden's belief. That has been the belief of every Democratic president. The only solution here is a two-state solution, an Israeli state and a Palestinian state living peacefully side by side. And that's what everybody has been working towards. When President Obama was in charge, he did try to pressure the Netanyahu government to make concessions, to restart the peace process, to stop the settlement activity, to do the sorts of things that would make a two-state solution viable in the future. He did not receive at that time the support I believe he should have received. from other precincts, both within the Democratic Party, but in the outer electorate. And that's really the obstacle. If you want a Palestinian state, and I certainly do, the thing that you need to do is you need to convince other Americans to be supportive of that. The Republican position is not in favor of a Palestinian state. Donald Trump has been very clear that he could care less about such a thing. That right-wing Israeli governments will be free and should be free to do whatever they wish in this regards, and they're not going to receive any pressure from the U.S. along those lines. But it is the American people, I feel, who need to be more supportive of a Palestinian state and need to be more supportive of an American president that works cooperatively with all sides to achieve that end. That is a place where persuasion is needed. And if you look at polling, I mean, Americans support Israel. I support Israel. I think most Democrats, most Americans do support Israel. But we also have to support a Palestinian state. We have to support entities, democratic entities, not Hamas, but democratic entities within Palestinian society that can help bring that about. And we need to convince our fellow American citizens that when a future President Biden, a future President Obama decides, I need to place some pressure on the Israeli government to make some concessions, that the American people will have his or her back. And I think that's where the energy should be going. So rather than voting uncommitted, I mean, I don't know what you're achieving with that. You already have Joe Biden. Joe Biden believes in a Palestinian state. He is he's willing to work towards that. He has worked towards that. He has done that for several decades. You need to convince other people in Michigan who are more conservative, people who are moderate Republicans, moderate Dems, people more to the right, that this is the only solution for peace in the Middle East is a two-state solution. The Democratic Party's solution to this problem is the only solution that we have. And that's where the energy should be going.
That was really well stated, and I completely agree. I support Israel, and I also support Palestine. I also believe that a two-state solution is going to be the best solution right now. I feel like it's not being, like you said, it's not being addressed, and we're not really talking about it in a way that I feel like is productive for anybody. And I feel like that's where Biden can be losing some people. And I also feel like, everyone's talking because the decision with SCOTUS was really big today. And this may be an unpopular opinion, but I believe that SCOTUS made the right decision. I'm not a lawyer. I've never gone to lawyering school. I've just dated a bunch of them. But I feel like you can't kick someone off of something for doing something they haven't been convicted of yet.
Right.
And he hasn't been convicted. So we cannot, you can't say, oh, we kicked you off the ballot because you committed insurrection. Yes, from the looks of it, it looked like he committed an insurrection. And I live in Washington, D.C. I'm currently in Washington, D.C. I'm actually walking distance from the Capitol. And when that happened, I was still in D.C. when it happened. I was just gobsmacked. It's like, yeah, it looks like an insurrection, but any good lawyer will tell you just because it looks like something doesn't mean it's something. And you have to be, the rule of law is you have to be convicted. You have to be tried and convicted. He hasn't been tried and convicted yet. So I think it's a little bit presumptuous to take him off of that ballot. And I do believe that it is up to the citizens to not vote for Trump. And I'm worried because I'm worried and not worried. From the looks of the primaries, Trump's numbers have dipped. Even though he won his Republican primaries, his numbers were lower than they were in 2016 and I believe 2020, which means, a lot of people aren't buying into what Trump is selling. And Trump has never sold anything. I don't believe that he had uh one issue that he campaigned on. I mean, he didn't really campaign on anything. And but it seems that there's less people willing to buy what he's selling than the past 2 years. I also believe that for whatever, well, I know why. The age thing and the conflict in Israel are both two really big reasons why you hear a lot of people talking about a third party candidate. And I just think a third party candidate is, we aren't set up for a third party candidate to win. And I don't really know how many ways I have to say this.
Okay.
Our electoral system does not, I think, I forgot what year it was. Like, one third party candidate got one electoral vote. And that was what, 30, 40, maybe 50 odd years ago. It's not going to happen. And we need to let that go. Am I right or am I wrong? Because I feel like no one's going to listen to me until someone of more authority to me says, no, Kia, you're right. It's not going to work. So, Che, is that going to work? A third party candidacy for the president?
No. So in a parliamentary system, you would be able to vote Green Party, for example, and then this happens in Europe. For example, the Netherlands has like 13 political parties. You would be able to vote like for a third party candidate, and that third party would then, cut a deal with the coalition. So, for example, in Germany, people who vote Green, that Green Party will then cut a deal with the Social Democrats to rule the country. So in parliamentary systems, multi parties, third parties, that makes a lot of sense. America, we have a winner take all, a zero sum game with the Electoral College, and so the only two candidates who can win the Electoral College and win and win the presidency are the Democratic and the Republican nominees, and that's kind of really the only choice that people have. So so the third party, is a situation where a lot of people are opposed to what I would call strategic voting. They sort of do not agree with the idea that that when you vote in a general election, you have to compromise to get there. The Democratic Party is a very, very broad coalition. Joe Biden's coalition included everyone from Joe Manchin to AOC. In 2020, he got endorsements from everyone from John Kasich to Angela Davis. This was a very, very broad coalition of people. But everyone who supported him and voted for him, I think, understood that the alternative was Donald Trump. And so I think that alternative of Donald Trump isn't yet in the minds of people yet. And I think that is something that's kind of fueling some of the third party feelings. Another thing that I would say for people who believe the party should be more in one direction ideologically, whether it's to the right or to the left, usually it's to the left on the Democratic side, is that's why we have party primaries. Bernie Sanders, for example, did end up moving, I think, Joe Biden to the left on economic issues. Joe Biden has been the most liberal president on economic issues that I've ever seen. And Bernie Sanders has gotten more out of Joe Biden than he's ever gotten out of any president. So it's fair to say, which is why I think he's very supportive of him. So that's kind of how the system works. You have party primaries that can move the party in one direction, and then you have a general election where everybody has to agree to compromise and just come and agree as to who the president should be.
I agree with that. I feel that Biden has moved a lot to the left on a lot of things. And just talking with my friends and family, I would joke. My joke was, oh, he's listening to his grandkids because they're young and he's listening to them. And he could be listening to them. I think the Washington Post had an article recently about how how Biden kind of not gets his ideas, but he really kind of listens to everyone when trying to craft policy. Like, he can be on the Amtrak and the conductor's like, this, and this, and he'll go back and go, hey, I think we should, this person said this, let's look into it, which I find to be incredibly refreshing, because I think one of the malaise of voters, especially Democratic voters now, is we feel like we're not being listened to, or a certain fraction of the Democratic base isn't being listened to. And I mean, I get it. Politics and voting and all of that just seems very mundane and very, you know, I don't want to do it. And unfortunately, I think a lot of voters kind of have a very short attention span, where we just want everything to be new and shiny and exciting. And this is not the election for new, shiny, and exciting. Like, if Trump gets elected, a lot of things are going to go left, and a lot of people, more than we think, we're going to have a problem. I am going to have a problem. So I think, because we're just used to new and shiny, that's what we want, and we want him to kind of be new and shiny, but he's not. He's a very, I mean, in some ways he is. Because I feel like Biden has done things that even I feel like Obama didn't do or started. And Biden just kind of went, oh, I'm going to take it to another level, going back to the social media and how he interacts with the social media. I feel like Biden really started that. And it started, like, social media really kind of took off with with Obama. I feel like Obama started, and he really tapped into social media, and I feel like Biden is running with that, which I love to see. But I think in a lot of ways, voters have this very short span of, okay, it's the two old people, and I get it. It's the two old people, but which old person would you like to have? And I think you have a lot of people who feel like, Trump really didn't do anything for me. Trump sort of did something for me with taxes, but that's a different story. And they feel like, well, Biden didn't do anything for me. He said he was going to, student loans. He said he was going to cut student loans. My student loans haven't been cut. So I think a lot of people want immediate satisfaction, and that's not how the government works. And I think a lot of it too has to do with a lot of people not truly understanding how the government works too. And, on the right, we feel like a lot of the GOP, especially MAGA supporters, want this kind of dictator to just wave his hand and things happen. But I also feel we have a little bit about that with Biden on the left too, where everybody just wants to wave a magic wand and everything gets better, and that it doesn't work that way. And I also think, and we don't talk about this enough too, how Biden has successfully sidestepped some things that he really wanted to get done, where Congress was like, no, we're not going to do it. And the Supreme Court was like, no, we're not going to do it. Let's take student loans, for example. He wanted to forgive 10 to 20% of student loans. Supreme Court said, no, you can't do that. He said, all right, well, I'm just going to find a way around that. And it takes time to find a way around it. And people were like, well, he said he was going to, forgive 20K of my student loans, and I still have them. And I'm like, okay, but he's forgiven a lot of people's student loans. He forgave my student loans. I found out in August, I got a letter from the Department of Education, your student loans have been forgiven. And I'm just like, I think I cried for like 2 minutes. I was like, what? I don't have any student loans anymore. And that was his sidestepping. And we're not talking about all the things he does. Oh, okay, well, you're going to stop me. I'm going to find a way to sidestep that. Do you think that, A, he is talking about the things that he's doing and people aren't listening? Or do you think he should be talking more about that?
So you brought up probably the central issue with Biden, which I alluded to, which is the age issue as a prerequisite.
Mm-hmm.
It has been a tremendous bar for him in terms of communication. So
Mm-hmm.
if you think about it, for Democrats, and keep in mind we are the party of government, the Democratic Party is a party of government. So
Right.
it's a different paradigm that we deal with than Republicans in terms of our coalitions, in terms of what we try to get out of the government, in terms of what our expectations are. The last three presidents who have been elected to 2 terms as Democrats, Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, Franklin Roosevelt. If you want to throw in John F. Kennedy, who, if he had not been assassinated, would have been elected to a second term, you can do that. But what do they all have in common? They were all were highly charismatic men, and they were men. Okay, I think that's kind of part of the discussion here. But they were highly charismatic men, and they were really great communicators, and they were, for the most part, on the younger side. The camera loved them, to whatever extent that people saw Franklin Roosevelt, it was through the radio, where he had a wonderful booming voice. And that was how Democrats got themselves into a second term. Joe Biden is not in that category in terms of charisma and communication. He, however, is more than in that category in terms of achievements, in terms of ability to pass legislation, in terms of his ability to put the country on the right course. So that's really the challenge that he faces. And that's why I think that he needs to talk first and foremost about his age and get that albatross lifted from voters so that they can then look towards his accomplishments and they can communicate those accomplishments more clearly so it doesn't get bogged down in an age discussion. The other thing is that Donald Trump is not a politician, he's an entertainer. He was president for 4 years, but for all intents and purposes, he was an entertainer. I mean, his following is much more that of a pop star or a sports star. Somebody like Tom Brady, or Kim Kardashian, or someone like that, than it is to any politician. He has a cult of personality that seems to be akin to like a pop culture figure or a reality star more than that of an actual politician. And so because he lives in that entertainment realm, that basically gives him a certain power within our media environment that a politician like Joe Biden simply does not have or possess, nor does I think he want to possess. The other thing is the issue of civics education, which is why I think we are so vulnerable to somebody like Trump. There's a lack of civics education in America as to what it takes to be a good citizen, what our rights and responsibilities are as citizens. To be honest, a lot of following the news and being an informed voter in a democracy is eating your vegetables. It's not terribly fun. Now, it's the job of someone like Ari Melber or myself when I'm on the show to try to make it more entertaining. But the reality is that there's a division of labor. Joseph Biden's job, first and foremost, is to be president of the United States. His job is not to entertain the masses with different provocations. Donald Trump sees it as his job to do that, and that's where we need a citizenry who can see through that and understand, I need first and foremost to make sure I eat good food before I have my dessert, rather than, being a kid who wants to eat dessert before it eats anything else. And I think that's I think a contemporary malady in American life. We are too entertainment addicted, and we sometimes don't understand the division of labor. That our politicians, on some level, have to be boring, and we should look towards people, whether it's on MSNBC or CNN or New York Times or TikTok, who can take the actual facts of what's occurred and perhaps make them more enjoyable for us and easier for us to digest.
Yeah, it kind of goes back to the whole we want something new and shiny and entertaining because that's, I think that's where our brains are right now, where I want my politician to be boring. I don't want a cult of personality. I want a
Right.
boring person who has kind of been in government for a while, know how things are done. One of the things Biden doesn't talk about is, and I think this dings him because of his age, well, he's been in there for so long. Yes. And because you do something for so long and you've been around these people who also have been there for a while, you kind of get a feel for, okay, I know I can ask this senator or this congressman to help push this piece of legislation. I know that this state needs this, and this senator may be more apt to help me with this over here. And I think you wouldn't get that a lot with someone who is less experienced and someone who's necessarily younger. I also think too that, I mean, every time someone talks about Biden, well, sometimes one of the things about Biden that I really do admire about him is the fact that people go, he's willing to talk to anybody and even go across the aisle, talk to Republicans, talk to whatever to get what he needs to for the betterment of everybody, not just a certain group of people. And I think that one of the things that Trump really did when he was in the White House was really cause this division. He didn't cause it. This division, I think, started with Obama. And it just got wider and wider. And then Trump came in and kind of sealed it to where we have this really type of divisive politics. And we've seen it play out. You have a whole group of Congress people that held up the government. You have a Speaker of the House who, FYI, I'm a little bit scared of because what happens if Trump does not win this time? Is Mike Johnson going to sit there and go, "Oh, we're just going to do fake electors and install him in," or is he going to be like, "Oh, I can't do that"? But you have certain people on the right. I don't know if it's a joke. I don't know if they're playing. I don't know if they actually do not know how to run the government, but they've sort of hijacked Congress and everyone is standing around like, well, what are we supposed to do? And I'm like, I don't know. There's these very few people that hijack Congress. I don't know, but I feel like I want a president that can talk to everybody and doesn't look at this other side as the enemy, because this group in Georgia also needs free lunches for school, and they also need pre-K and Head Start. And if you work with me, Senator so and so from wherever, and you're a Republican, your people want this. Maybe we can work together and have everyone get it. And I feel like there's some people in Congress that's just like, no, I'm only going to do what I want to do. And then they turn around and lie to their constituents, either saying, oh, well, Biden said we couldn't do this or whatever. And I'm like, the vote is a record that we can look up as 5 seconds. And you voted against this. And we saw that with the IVF bill. You had all these Republicans said, oh, no, we didn't vote against that and we didn't do that. And it's like, okay, but you did. And then they still did it. And
Yeah.
it's like, I don't want a president like that. I also need people to truly understand how their government works, which you said we don't have that. And small story. I'm neurodivergent, so bear with me, Chang. Small story. I went away to school. So I was born and raised in Washington, D.C. A lot of my family worked for the federal government. And I kind of felt like I had a little bit more of a better sense of how the government works just because I lived here and I have family members in the government. So I knew all about, oh, spending, and if we're going to get funding for this and if we're going to get funding for that and all of that. And I went to school in North Carolina first. And we have a discussion about politics and the amount of people who did not know. I forgot what was being said, but they was like, well, the president can fix it. And I was like, well, actually he can't. That has to go through Congress. And if Congress says no, then I said, sometimes he can veto it. But still, like, we have checks and balances for a reason. The amount of people that didn't know the three branches of government, didn't know we had checks and balances, didn't know what the president could and could not do. And when I was in DC surrounded by people my own age, I felt like they kind of knew that. And then I went to school in Boston and kind of the same thing happened. And so I'm like, now with the invention of social media and I get to talk to people all over the place, I feel that same sense of there's a lot of people who don't know how it works. And I'm like, okay, did we all not get the same government class or civics class in high school, or you were absent that day? What exactly is it? Because this is not how any of this works. And you vote. Like, if you're going to vote, at least be somewhat informed about it, but you don't even know what's going on or how anything is run, and you just want all of these magical things. And I don't know if it's because I was born here or I just like politics and journalism. I don't know if it's one or both or the other, but I agree with you. There is a lack of knowledge about civics and government. And it seems that some of those people that have a severe lack of that are also in Congress right now, governing. And I don't know how we ended. I honestly don't know how we ended up here. I thought we wouldn't be here, but here we are. So, if you were running Biden's campaign, what would you suggest besides the anything else besides talking about his age and getting in front of that, which I absolutely agree. Like, how could he talk about his age? Because I feel like what he did on Seth Meyers was brilliant. I thought, yes,
Right.
that was really great. Keep doing that. But what else?
Yeah, so going back to your point about like how we got here, like one thing I'll say about that is, and I think I said this on a segment on the Beat last week, that if you think about American presidents, there is basically a single formulation, which is they unite everybody behind a common purpose. And you can disagree with that purpose. So I would not have necessarily agreed. I certainly would not have necessarily agreed with Reagan's purposes, but that's kind of how he did it. Like, he united people behind that purpose. I do remember George W. Bush united people behind the common purpose of the Iraq War, which was disastrous.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of how they did it. That's certainly how Barack Obama governed. That's certainly how Joe Biden governs. That's certainly how Bill Clinton governs, etc. Trump is very different. What Trump believes is the goal of the president is to take all the people who he voted for and lead them into a war against the people who don't support him, the other Americans. So for him, the enemy is always other Americans. And what him and his supporters see as the ultimate goal is the humiliation and subjugation of other Americans who oppose them. So Ben Shapiro has this formulation, liberal tears. You hear this a lot among conservatives. What they want is liberal tears.
Mm-hmm.
That is their idea as to what the purpose of politics is. The purpose of politics is liberal tears. It's simply to own the libs and to upset and make liberals angry. So if you think about an issue like the wall, right? I mean, for all intents and purposes, Trump could have gotten a wall when he had Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell in those first 2 years he was president. He was not interested at that point, and he only became interested when it became a conversation that he could use to attack the other side with. And people who are serious immigration hawks, unlike myself, I'm not an immigration hawk at all. I'm very pro immigration. But people who are immigration hawks will tell you that a wall would really do very little to stop undocumented people from coming across the border. It would be purely superficial and for show. But the reason Trump talks about it and the reason his followers still sort of glom onto it is because they know the conversation about the wall, the argument about the wall, is very upsetting to those who oppose them, to people like
Yes.
myself, who is an immigrant, to people who come from more diverse communities who understand the symbolism of this and what it represents to have a wall like that erected on the southern border, etc. So that's kind of that Trump effect has now taken over the entire Republican Party, where they all see the role of politics not to unite Americans behind a common purpose, but to divide Americans and to seek to defeat, humiliate, subjugate, upset other Americans. They see that as the goal of politics. And part of the reason that we have gotten here is because, one, we have a lack of civics education, I think, in the school level. But then social media then works to exacerbate those differences and to make that Trumpian type of politics much more prevalent and common. So that has kind of swooped into the vacuum, I think, and caused a lot of this. As far as what other things I would do is in terms of the Biden campaign beyond talking about age, I think that he needs to discuss the future of the country economically, but also morally as it pertains to the environment and reproductive rights. I think he's extremely soft with younger voters because of that discussion, or because of the lack of that discussion. So I think that that is a discussion that he really needs to talk about. I think that the discussion has to be entirely about the future of the American economy. What kind of economy do we want to have? Both for people who are college educated and for people who are non-college educated, and the future of the world, which includes a discussion of foreign policy, includes a discussion of how do we, as democracies, as one of the world's democracies, along with Europe and Japan and South Korea and the other great democracies in the world, how do we navigate this world where we have dictatorships that are on the rise, authoritarianism that's on the rise, and also the climate and environment. How do we get to a future that's better for all of us environmentally as well? So I think that the future has to be sort of a big theme of the Biden campaign, the American future, and the world's future. And what kind of future do we want it to be? Do we really want it to be a Trumpian future with endless reality show gimmicks and arguments and antics and things like that? Or do we want a more substantive future for ourselves and for our families?
I like it. I can dig it. I can dig it. I like it. Well, Che, this has been very enlightening and very enlightening. I hope that some of my viewers will take heed to what was said tonight because I think it's really important. And I also love the idea of Biden thinking about what our future is as a campaign strategy because I think that is the I think that's really inside what a lot of voters are really kind of wanting. They want a better future. And I think they're looking at the future now and they're thinking, you know, I can't afford a home. I don't make a living wage. I can't have a level of upward mobility. I think people are no longer believing in the American dream, so to speak. And I think that's something that he really does need to speak to because I truly do believe all of these issues that, and I'm talking about right now Democratic voters.
Sure.
I feel like a lot of them, especially a lot of ones who may be living paycheck to paycheck, maybe of a certain socioeconomic status, they're just kind of feeling like, I think part of them feel like, nope, they're not talking to me. No, no politician is talking to me, which I don't believe that's true. I think Biden really is talking to them, but they may not want to hear what Biden is saying. Biden is pro-union. I think unionization is really important. And I think that unions can really help people, especially gain a foothold on the economic ladder, being in a union. I think he does, but no one wants to hear it because, again, I think people kind of want quick fixes to things, and these aren't quick fixes to things. And I think people are just really tired. They're tired of working and not having any money. They're tired of completely unaffordable housing. I think that they are tired of, COVID is still kind of hanging around. And so you still have another group of people that are still, rightfully so, afraid of COVID. COVID could kill them. You have immune compromised and immune suppressed people. COVID could literally kill. COVID could kill my mom. My mom has an autoimmune disease. And so even now, we still mask when we go to the store because I'm like, I don't want her to get sick. You still have that. You still have people. And I think the pandemic really did a number on people. And I think we're still kind of living with the aftermath of that. And you just have a lot of Democrats that are just like, I'm tired of living like this. And I think the best message for all of us to hear is, I am here to give you a better future. And it's not going to be instantaneous. And you have to work with me. And by working with him, you also have to vote on a local level, because all of those people have something to do with your future and how your government is run, even local governments, even for Senate. I don't have a senator. I'm in DC. I only have a congressperson, and she can only do but so much. But and not only that, also understanding that the people that you vote for also have a hand in the lives of other people. And I use DC as an example. We're not completely in control of our budget. Like, our budget has to go to Congress, and you have people voting on it. There are certain parts we don't have any control over. So when you also vote, you're also voting for people that's also going to have a hand in another group of people who really have no real representation in Congress. And I think people need to understand that. I think part of this I'm tired goes into, well, I only want to care about me and mine and not anybody else, when you realize we are all in this together and we have to vote to help each other. We're not voting just for us. We're voting for everybody else. I want free health care, not just for me, but I want it for everybody. I want everyone's student loans to be taken care of and forgiven, not just mine. I want everyone's to be. And I think a lot of us are just kind of like tired and downtrodden and like, okay. And I think one of the things Biden really, really should do is exactly what you said, and talk about, this is the future I want to give you as your public servant. I'm a public servant, and this is what I want to do, but I can't do it alone. I need your help, and I need for you to vote, and I need for you to vote for your congressmen, your senators, the state level too. I need for you to vote down ballot for everything, the local dog catcher, everybody, because I can't do it by myself. And these are the things I want for you. And I think that is like the perfect message for him. And I want to say I kind of am seeing it, but we'll see what happens in the next couple of months if that is the direction he takes. But I think that's a really good direction. And I hope someone sees this podcast and go, I think Che had a really good point, and I think we should do that, Biden. So in the 10 minutes we have left, I heard we're going to do something fun. I heard that you're really into movies. Is that true? Are you like a
Yes,
movie buff?
I'm a very serious cinephile. Absolutely, yes.
Oh,
Okay.
okay. So, your favorite movie of all time, what is it?
So it's basically two movies.
Okay.
Grand Illusion by Jean Renoir and Citizen Kane by Orson Welles. Pauline Kael said there's two types of movies. Movies where the medium comes together, comes alive with kinetic energy. And that the best example of that is Citizen Kane. And then there are movies where the medium itself sort of fades away and you kind of forget you're even watching a movie. And the best example of that is Grand Illusion. And so also those two movies kind of represent like the two major filmmaking nations, America and France, as in addition to sort of representing two different ways of approaching cinema.
What was your favorite movie this past year?
So my favorite movie this past year, so the movie that I would vote for the Oscar would be Oppenheimer. And so what my belief about movies, about the Oscars, is that I feel the Oscars have gone away from their traditional criteria. The traditional criteria for the Oscars was the best movie that made the most money, that made a lot of money.
Okay.
Sort of the best blend of art and commerce. Because there is an actual sort of a skill to making a movie that's really good, but also makes a lot of money. So the skills that, say, someone like Steven Spielberg possesses is very different than what, say, Ingmar Bergman possesses. But I think the Oscars should be about rewarding Steven Spielbergs of the world. So that's kind of my own controversial opinion. In the 90s, I had the opposite opinion. I was one of those people who was rooting for Pulp Fiction over Forrest Gump and for LA Confidential over Titanic. And then the Oscars came around to my way of thinking, and I hated it. And I was like, oh, this is terrible. So Oppenheimer was probably the best movie that was probably the best movie that made a lot of money. It was the best blend of art and commerce for this last year. So I would definitely put that movie very, very high up. Beyond that, I really love Past Lives. Sort of as a great little indie movie. I thought that was really terrific. I thought Zone of Interest, which was also nominated for Best Picture, was really great. I thought Anatomy of a Fall, the French movie, was outstanding as well. So I thought all of those movies were really, really great movies.
I plan to see Oppenheimer. I haven't seen it yet. I plan to see it. I don't think I've seen Citizen Kane. I know about Citizen Kane. I don't think I've seen it. My all-time favorite movie, it's a bad one. It's Clue.
Yes. So I love the version of Clue that I used to see on Netflix. I don't know which streaming service it is on now, but I remember I saw it many, many years ago on Netflix, where they have all the different endings, one after another. And I actually remember watching that and understanding why this movie would have bombed in the theaters, because when it was released in theaters, each screen had a different ending. And I could see how people would feel very unsatisfied with that. But when you see the version that you get on streaming with all the different endings, one after another, it's so entertaining. And it kind of brings the whole thing together in a great way.
It does. It does. And I think when Clue came out in the movie theater, I was in elementary school. I was a kid. And I love the game. So I collect clues. I have 2 clue board games. One is Harry Potter and the other one talks. It literally you put the little piece down and it talks. When the movie came out in theaters, I thought it was a really neat idea, but I'm saying that as a 5, 6, 7. I forgot what year it came out. And and my first question was, well, how do you know if you're in the movie theater with the right ending? Like, will they tell you that you saw the wrong ending?
Right.
And I didn't see it in a movie theater. I saw it when it came out on cable.
Right.
And I was like, oh wow, this is cool. We get to see like all the endings. So it is more entertaining because then you're like, oh, this is how it really happened. Um, so that's one of my favorite movies. And my other one is Boogie Nights. And I don't know, actually I do know why. I thought the stories of the different people were kind of moving, and I really think it really humanized. Um, I think the movie kind of humanized a group of people that don't
Right.
normally get humanity, which is adult film stars. I think we have this habit of dismissing certain people that do certain jobs. And I think one of the things I kind of liked about Boogie Nights is that without intending to, you humanized all these people and saw that all these people had feelings, they had other things going on, they had a whole life beyond that. And I like that movie. It was kind of sad, it was a little bit
Yeah.
disturbing, but at the end I felt like I could root for all of these people. I like movies where there's at least somebody I can sort of root for. um
Yeah, I mean, I think that Julianne Moore's character in particular, I
yes,
mean, I thought that was a brilliant Julianne Moore performance. I forget who
yes,
she lost the Oscar to. I think it was Kim Basinger for LA
I think she did.
Confidential. Yeah, but I thought
Mhm.
that Julianne Moore performance was just an incredible performance,
Yes.
where she has this sort of Earth Mother sort of tone to her, and she kind of combines all these different elements of this character really, really well. In addition, I remember the scene with Alfred Molina, the central scene in the movie where they do the crime, where they have Sister Christian and
Mhm.
I think Jesse's Girl, the two songs
Yes.
that are playing.
Yes.
That I think is like the single best scene of the 1990s. I think it's an
Mhm.
incredible scene. Like you're on the edge of your seat the whole way through. And Paul Thomas Anderson, is such a great filmmaker. And every sort of movie he makes, he does it in the style of a different filmmaker that he admires. So Boogie Nights was the movie that he did very much in the style of Scorsese. So you have this long
Yeah, I
tracking
can see
shot of
that.
beginning Boogie Nights that very much evokes the long tracking shot in Goodfellas. And there's so many elements of Goodfellas, like certain shots, the different characters in Goodfellas, all of those sorts of things are kind of brought into that movie and done very seamlessly by Paul Thomas Anderson. And then the next movie, Magnolia, he emulated Robert Altman. And then in the next movie, the movie that Punch Drunk Love with Adam Sandler, he emulates the Coen brothers. And so
I
he
can
and then with There Will Be Blood, he emulates the Stanley Kubrick and Orson Welles. So he kind of he's such an interesting filmmaker because he adopts all these different director personas. And the other great filmmaker of his generation, Quentin Tarantino, is kind of the opposite of that, where he kind of has the same persona and the same filmmaking style he does in multiple
yeah.
different movies and finds different ways of sort of reinventing his own unique style.
Yeah. I agree. And I didn't realize how many who directed Boogie Nights again?
Paul Thomas Anderson, it was his second film. His first was a great movie called Hard Eight with Gwyneth Paltrow
I didn't.
and John C. Reilly. They are in that movie. So that was his second movie, was Boogie Nights. And it's interesting also because, he very much sets up the movie as kind of this is the dark side of Hollywood. Like, so you have all the same
Yes.
elements you have in Hollywood, the director egos, the star egos, the people who are trying to become stars, all of those sorts of elements are kind of woven into the movie. But it's done through the prism of the adult filmmaking world, which is seen as kind of the dark opposite of Hollywood, or
Yes.
the dark negative of Hollywood, I should say.
I didn't realize, but I've also seen Magnolia too, and I really did like Magnolia. And so when you're talking about it, I was like, yeah, he does kind of change things. I never know who does a movie. I'm just kind of like, oh, this movie sounds interesting. I'm going to go watch it. And I don't pay attention. You're like the movie genius. So Ari Melber's a rap genius, and you're a movie genius.
Right. Well, I would, yes, I would say I'm definitely, I'm probably as into cinema as he is into hip hop.
It's yeah. Shay, thank you so much for spending the hour with me. I thoroughly appreciate it. And we learned a lot tonight. So thank you. Um, everybody, this has been another episode of I Got a Lot of Things to Say. I'm Kia Dotson, and see you next time.